My name is Emma Walsh. I am 28 years old. For the last 4 years, I have loved one man with my whole heart. His name is Daniel Reyes. We met in college, in a boring economics class neither of us wanted to take. He sat next to me because it was the only open seat left. I remember he asked to borrow a pencil that very first day, then spent the rest of the lecture doodling small, terrible cartoons in the margin of his notebook, sliding it toward me every few minutes to make me laugh silently in the back row. By the end of the semester, we were best friends. By the end of the year, we were something more. I still remember our first real date clearly, 5 years ago now. Daniel took me to a small diner near campus, the kind of place with sticky booths and a menu that never changed. He was so nervous he spilled his water twice, and I found his nervousness completely endearing, a soft crack in the otherwise easygoing, quietly confident young man I had grown to know as a friend. By the time dessert arrived, we were both laughing so hard at his own clumsiness that the waitress asked if we were all right. "I promise I'm usually more graceful than this," he told me that night, cheeks still faintly pink with embarrassment. "I don't believe you," I had teased back, "but I like this version of you just fine." 4 years later, we were still together, still happy, still very much in love. At least, that is what I believed with my whole heart. Daniel worked as an engineer at a construction company downtown. I worked as a teacher at the local elementary school. We were not rich, but we were comfortable. We had our own small apartment. We had our routines, our jokes, our quiet Sunday mornings with coffee and old movies. I loved him more than I had ever loved anyone. And for months, I had been thinking about marriage. We had talked about it before, in soft, sleepy conversations late at night. Daniel always said things like, "Someday, Em," or "When the time is right." I understood. Weddings cost money. We were both still saving. There was no rush. But lately, something had shifted in me. I turned 28 in the spring, and something about that birthday made me feel ready. Ready to build a real future. Ready to stop waiting for someday and start living it. So I decided to do something bold. I decided to propose to him myself. I know it is usually the man who proposes, but Daniel was always shy about big romantic gestures. He showed his love in small ways instead, making my coffee just right, fixing things around the apartment without being asked, remembering small details I mentioned only once. I loved him for that. But I also knew that if I waited for him to make the big move, I might be waiting for years. So I planned it carefully. Daniel's younger sister, Lily, was getting married that summer. The wedding would be a big, beautiful event at a vineyard just outside the city, with almost 200 guests. Daniel's whole family would be there. My family would be there too, since our families had grown close over the years. I decided the reception would be the perfect moment. After the dancing, after the toasts, I would stand up in front of everyone and ask Daniel to marry me. It felt romantic. It felt bold. It felt like exactly the kind of memory we would tell our own children about someday. I bought a ring, a simple gold band with a small, elegant diamond, using almost all my savings. I practiced my speech in the mirror for weeks. I told Lily my plan, swearing her to secrecy, and she cried happy tears, hugging me tightly. "He is going to say yes so fast," she told me. "Emma, he loves you so much. I have never seen my brother look at anyone the way he looks at you." I believed her completely. Why wouldn't I? Daniel and I had built 4 years of love together, brick by brick, moment by moment. I had no reason to doubt him. The night before the wedding, I lay awake in bed, going over my speech one more time, my heart fluttering with nervous excitement. Daniel slept peacefully beside me, completely unaware of what I was planning. I looked at him in the moonlight coming through our window, his face relaxed and calm in sleep, and I felt overwhelming love swell in my chest. "Tomorrow," I whispered to myself, "tomorrow everything changes." I had no idea, lying there in the dark beside the man I loved, just how right and how wrong that thought would turn out to be. The vineyard looked like something from a dream. Long tables covered in white cloth stretched across the green lawn, decorated with candles and soft pink flowers. String lights hung between the trees, waiting for evening to make them glow. Lily looked stunning in her wedding dress, and her new husband Marcus could not stop smiling the entire ceremony. I sat beside Daniel during the ceremony, holding his hand, my heart already racing with thoughts of what I was planning to do later that evening. He squeezed my hand gently during the vows, leaning over to whisper, "This will be us someday." My heart soared at his words. It felt like a sign, like confirmation that tonight was exactly the right moment. "Someday soon, I hope," I whispered back, smiling at him. He smiled back, but something in his eyes flickered for just a second, something I did not think much of at the time. Looking back now, I wonder if I should have noticed it more carefully. The reception was beautiful. We ate delicious food, danced under the string lights, laughed with old friends and family members we had not seen in months. Daniel seemed happy, but also slightly distracted throughout the evening. He kept checking his phone more than usual. He excused himself twice to take phone calls outside, saying it was work. "On a Saturday night?" I asked, a little confused, when he returned from the second call looking pale and tense. "You know how construction projects are," he said quickly, forcing a smile. "Always some emergency." I did not think much of it at the time. I was too focused on my own plan, too nervous about the speech I had memorized, too excited about the moment I believed was about to change our lives forever. At one point during the evening, my mother pulled me aside near the dessert table, her eyes bright with excitement. "You're really going to do it tonight?" she whispered, already having been let in on the secret weeks earlier. "I think so," I said, my stomach fluttering with nerves. "Do you think it's crazy? A woman proposing in front of everyone like this?" "I think it's brave," my mother said, squeezing my hand warmly, "and I think Daniel would be a fool to say anything but yes." I held on to her words tightly as the evening wore on, using them like a small shield against the growing knot of nerves twisting in my stomach. I watched Daniel across the reception, laughing at something his cousin said, and felt a fresh wave of love and certainty wash over me. Whatever strange distraction had been pulling at him throughout the evening, I told myself, it could not possibly change what I already knew to be true between us. Around 10 o'clock, after the cake had been cut and the dancing had slowed into something softer and more romantic, I decided it was time. My heart pounded so hard I worried everyone could hear it. I caught Lily's eye across the room, and she gave me a small, encouraging nod. I stood up from our table, my leg trembling slightly beneath my long blue dress. I picked up a glass and gently tapped it with a spoon, the way people do before a toast. The soft chatter around the tables slowly quieted, guests turning curiously in their seats. "Excuse me, everyone," I said, my voice shaking slightly, but growing stronger with each word. "I know this is Lily and Marcus's night, and I promise, I am not trying to steal any attention from them." A few gentle laughs rippled through the crowd. Lily beamed at me from her seat, practically bouncing with excitement. "But I have been given this beautiful gift tonight," I continued. "The gift of standing here, surrounded by the people I love most, on a night that celebrates love itself." And I realized there is something I have wanted to say for a long time, to someone very important to me. I turned to face Daniel, who was staring up at me with wide eyes, clearly confused, his face turning slightly pale. "Daniel," I said, my voice trembling with emotion now, 4 years ago, you sat next to me in a boring economics class because it was the only seat left. I thank God every day for that seating arrangement." More soft laughter from the guests. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely think straight, but I pushed forward, pulling the small velvet box from my clutch purse. I got down on one knee in front of him, in front of everyone, my hands shaking as I opened the box to reveal the ring inside. "Daniel Reyes," I said, tears now streaming freely down my face. "I love you more than I have ever loved anyone. I want to build a life with you, a real life, a family, a future. Will you marry me?" The entire vineyard went completely silent. 200 guests held their breath, waiting. Daniel stared at me, at the ring, his face turning from pale to almost gray. For a long, agonizing moment, he said nothing at all. Then, in a voice that seemed to echo across the silent lawn, he said the words that shattered my entire world. "Emma, I can't." The words hung in the air like a physical blow. I stayed frozen on one knee, the ring box still open in my trembling hands, staring up at Daniel's pale, panicked face. For one impossible second, I actually thought I had misheard him. 200 candles flickered around us, the string lights glowed softly overhead, and somewhere nearby a waiter had paused mid-step, tray balanced carefully in his hands, caught in the same frozen silence as everyone else. Surely, I told myself, surely he had said something else. Something my racing heart had simply twisted into the two most devastating words imaginable. "What?" I whispered, my voice barely audible. "I can't," Daniel repeated, standing up so quickly his chair nearly toppled over behind him. "Emma, I'm sorry. I can't do this. Not right now. Not like this." A gasp rippled through the crowd. I heard someone's fork clatter against a plate. Somewhere behind me, I heard Lily whisper, "Oh no," her voice full of shock and horror. I slowly rose to my feet, the ring box still clutched tightly in my shaking hand, my face burning with a humiliation so intense I thought I might actually be sick right there on the beautiful green lawn. "Daniel," I said, my voice cracking, "please, can we talk about this somewhere private?" "I need some air," he said instead, not looking at me, not looking at anyone. He turned and walked quickly away from the table, disappearing into the darkness beyond the string lights, leaving me standing there alone in front of 200 stunned wedding guests. For a moment, I simply stood there, frozen, the ring box still open in my hand, tears streaming silently down my face. Then Lily was suddenly beside me, wrapping her arms around me tightly. "Emma, I am so sorry," she said, her own voice thick with tears. "I don't understand. I don't understand what just happened." I could not speak. I could not think. All I could feel was the overwhelming weight of 200 pairs of eyes on me, watching the worst moment of my entire life unfold in real time. My mother rushed over next, her face pale with shock, wrapping her arms around me from the other side. "Sweetheart, let's get you somewhere quiet," she said gently. They led me away from the tables, away from the whispers already starting to spread across the vineyard like wildfire, into a small private room near the vineyard's main building. I sat down on a small couch, still clutching the ring box, my whole body shaking with silent sobs. "I don't understand," I finally managed to say, my voice broken. "We talked about marriage before. He said someday. He held my hand during the ceremony and told me this would be us someday. Why would he do this? Why would he let me get down on one knee in front of everyone just to say no?" Lily sat down beside me, her wedding makeup now smeared with her own tears. "I don't know, Emma. I have never seen my brother behave like this. Something is wrong. Something more than just not wanting to get married." "What do you mean?" I asked, wiping at my eyes. "He's been strange lately," Lily said slowly, thinking back. "Distracted, distant. I thought maybe it was just work stress, but now I'm not so sure." My mother squeezed my hand gently. "Whatever the reason, sweetheart, you did nothing wrong. You loved him bravely, honestly. That is never something to be ashamed of." But shame was exactly what I felt, burning through every part of me. I thought about the 200 guests outside, probably already discussing what had happened, probably already feeling sorry for me, probably already whispering about the woman who proposed and got rejected in front of an entire wedding. "I need to go home," I said quietly. "I can't stay here another minute." My mother nodded understandingly and offered to drive me back to the city immediately. As we walked toward the parking area, avoiding the curious eyes of lingering guests, I caught a brief glimpse of Daniel standing near the vineyard's edge, alone, his phone pressed to his ear, his shoulders hunched with what looked like deep distress. For a moment, our eyes met across the darkened lawn. He looked utterly wrecked, his face pale and tight, with something that looked almost like fear. But I was too hurt, too humiliated, too broken to try to understand what that expression might mean. I looked away and got into my mother's car, and we drove home in silence, my whole future collapsing behind us with every mile. The days following the wedding passed in a strange, painful blur. I called in sick to school for the entire week, unable to face my students, unable to face anyone, really. My mother stayed with me at my apartment those first few days, gently coaxing me to eat, to shower, to at least get out of bed occasionally. Daniel did not come home that first night. Or the second. His clothes still hung in our shared closet. His books still sat on our shared shelf, but he himself seemed to have vanished completely from my life, leaving nothing behind but silence and unanswered questions. I called him dozens of times that first week. Every call went straight to voicemail. I sent messages, some angry, some pleading, some simply asking, why. None of them received a response. Maybe he's just embarrassed, Lily suggested during one of her frequent visits, still clearly shaken by what had happened at her own wedding. Maybe he needs time to figure out how to explain himself. He humiliated me in front of 200 people, I said, my voice flat with exhaustion. The least he could do is explain why. By the end of the first week, I had gone from devastated to angry, and by the second week, from angry to something colder and more determined. I decided I needed answers, whether Daniel wanted to give them to me or not. Returning to school that second week proved harder than I expected. My students, thankfully too young to know anything about grown-up heartbreak, greeted me with their usual boundless energy, but my fellow teachers offered careful, sympathetic glances in the staff room, clearly having heard some version of what happened, whether through mutual friends or the quietly circulating video. You don't have to talk about it, my closest work friend, a kind woman named Priya, told me during lunch one day, sliding an extra cookie onto my tray without being asked. But I'm here if you ever want to. Thank you, I said, grateful for her gentle patience, rather than prying questions. I just wish I understood what I did wrong. Emma, Priya said firmly, you didn't do anything wrong. You loved someone bravely. Whatever is going on with him, that's his story to carry, not a reflection of your worth. Her words offered small comfort during those difficult days, though the ache of confusion remained heavy in my chest every single morning I woke up alone in our shared apartment, staring at Daniel's empty side of the bed. I went to our apartment on a Saturday afternoon, ready to pack up his belongings and leave them outside our door if necessary. Instead, I found him there already, sitting quietly at our kitchen table, looking thinner than I remembered, dark circles heavy beneath his eyes. Daniel, I said, standing frozen in the doorway. He looked up at me, and for a moment, something flickered across his face. Relief, maybe, or fear, or both. Emma, he said quietly, I was hoping you would come by. You could have called, I said, my voice sharper than I intended. You could have answered any of my 50 calls or messages over the past 2 weeks. I know, he said softly. I'm sorry. I have been dealing with something. Dealing with what, exactly? I demanded, finally stepping fully into the apartment, closing the door behind me. You humiliated me in front of everyone we know, Daniel. My family, your family, our friends, all of them watched you reject me. The least you owe me is an explanation. Daniel's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I saw something like real pain flash across his tired features. It's complicated, Emma. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is, I said, my voice breaking slightly despite my anger. Please, I deserve to know why the man I love destroyed me in front of 200 people. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, staring down at his hands on the table. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were wet with tears he seemed to be fighting hard to hold back. I can't tell you right now, he said quietly. I'm sorry, Emma. I know that's not fair. I know you deserve better than this. But I need time. There are things happening that I am not ready to explain yet. Not ready? I repeated, my voice rising with disbelief. Daniel, you owe me an explanation right now. You cannot just say, I can't, in front of everyone, and then disappear for 2 weeks and come back saying you're not ready to explain yourself. I know how this looks, Daniel said, his voice thick with emotion. I know how badly I hurt you. But please, Emma, I am asking you to trust me just a little longer. I promise I will explain everything when I can. When you can? I said, tears now streaming down my own face. Daniel, I need to know if you even want to be with me anymore. I need to know if everything we built together for the past 4 years meant anything real to you." "Of course it meant something," Daniel said, his voice cracking. "Emma, I love you. I have never loved anyone the way I love you." "Then why?" I nearly screamed the question, my heart breaking all over again. "Why would you say no in front of everyone if you love me?" Daniel closed his eyes, looking utterly exhausted, utterly broken. "Because saying yes right now would have been the most selfish thing I could possibly do to you," he said quietly. "And I love you too much to be selfish with your future, Emma, even if it means losing you completely." His words made no sense to me, tangled and mysterious and completely unsatisfying. I stood there, staring at him, desperate for more, for actual answers instead of vague, painful riddles. But Daniel simply shook his head, tears finally spilling down his own cheeks. "I need more time," he whispered. "Please, Emma, just a little more time." I left the apartment that day more confused and hurt than ever, carrying with me the strange, haunting weight of his words. Something was clearly very wrong. But whatever it was, Daniel was not yet ready to share it with me, no matter how badly I needed to understand. 3 more weeks passed in a strange, uncomfortable limbo. Daniel moved out of our shared apartment, renting a small studio nearby, saying he needed space to sort things out. I threw myself into work, grading papers late into the night, avoiding my own empty apartment as much as possible. My apartment, once filled with the comfortable sounds of 2 people sharing a life, now felt unbearably quiet in the evenings. I found myself leaving the television on simply for the noise, cooking meals for 2 out of habit before catching myself, and quietly putting half of it away. Small, ordinary reminders of Daniel seemed to wait for me everywhere, his favorite mug still in the cabinet, his reading glasses still on the nightstand, a jacket he had forgotten still hanging by the door. Everyone had opinions about what had happened. My mother thought Daniel had simply gotten cold feet, panicking under the pressure of a public proposal. My coworkers whispered sympathetically whenever they thought I was not listening. Even strangers seemed to know, somehow, thanks to a blurry video someone had taken during the proposal that had quietly spread among mutual friends online. I hated all of it. The whispers, the pity, the endless speculation. But most of all, I hated not knowing the truth. One afternoon, about a month after the wedding, I ran into Daniel's mother, Carmen, at the grocery store. She had always been kind to me, warm and welcoming since the very beginning of my relationship with her son. When she saw me, her face immediately softened with something that looked like deep, sorrowful sympathy. "Emma," she said, setting down her shopping basket to hug me tightly. "I have been wanting to call you. I am so sorry for everything." "Do you know why he did it?" I asked immediately, unable to hold back the question any longer. "Carmen, please. If you know anything, I need to know too." Carmen's expression flickered with something complicated, guilt mixed with hesitation. "Emma, it is not my place to share Daniel's private business. But I promise you, whatever is happening, it has nothing to do with how he feels about you." "Then what does it have to do with?" I pressed, my voice trembling with frustration. Carmen hesitated, glancing around the busy grocery store, as if worried about being overheard. "Have you seen him recently? Has he seemed unwell to you?" Something cold settled into my stomach at her words. "Unwell how?" "I really shouldn't say more," Carmen said, looking suddenly regretful for having said as much as she already had. "Please, Emma, just be patient with him. Whatever he decides to tell you, please remember that he loves you very much. I have never seen my son love anyone the way he loves you." She left the grocery store quickly after that, leaving me standing alone with my half-full shopping cart and a heart full of new, terrifying questions. Unwell. The word echoed in my mind for days afterward. I thought back over the past few months, searching my memory for anything I might have missed. Daniel had seemed tired more often lately. Yes, but I had assumed it was simply work stress. He had lost a little weight, but I had assumed it was because he had started running again. He had gone to several doctor's appointments recently, but he told me they were simply routine checkups. Had I missed something important? Had there been signs all along that I simply failed to notice, too distracted by my own excitement over wedding planning to see what was really happening right in front of me? That evening, Unable to stop myself, I searched through some old photographs on my phone, looking for anything that might offer a clue. I found a photo from about 2 months earlier, taken during a quiet weekend trip to the coast. Daniel stood on the beach, laughing at something I had said, the wind blowing his dark hair across his forehead. Something about the photo made me pause. I zoomed in closer, studying his face carefully. There, barely visible beneath his collar, was a small bandage, the kind used after a blood test or minor medical procedure. My heart began to race. I searched through more photos, going back further and further in time, and found similar small bandages appearing in several more pictures over the past 4 months, always carefully hidden beneath his clothing, always something I had simply overlooked in the busy rush of daily life. 4 months. That timeline lined up almost exactly with when Daniel had first started seeming distracted and tired. I sat there on my couch, staring at the photographs, my mind racing through terrifying possibilities. Was he sick? Seriously sick? Was that the secret he was too afraid to share with me? I thought about Carmen's careful, worried words at the grocery store. I thought about Daniel's own broken explanation. Saying yes right now would have been the most selfish thing I could possibly do to you. Slowly, painfully, pieces began falling into place in my mind, forming a picture far more frightening than simple cold feet or a failed relationship. I needed to see Daniel immediately. I needed real answers, whatever they might be. I did not sleep at all that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling, replaying every photograph, every hidden bandage, every strange, distracted moment over the past 4 months, trying to piece together a picture that made any kind of sense. By the time the sun began rising outside my window, I had convinced myself of a dozen different terrifying possibilities, each one worse than the last. I drove to Daniel's new studio apartment that same night, my hands trembling on the steering wheel the entire drive. But when I arrived, knocking urgently on his door, no one answered. I tried calling him repeatedly, growing more frantic with every unanswered ring. Finally, desperate, I called Lily, hoping she might know where her brother was. "Emma?" Lily answered, sounding surprised. "It's almost 11 at night. Is everything okay?" "I need to find Daniel," I said, my voice shaking. "Lily, I think something is seriously wrong. I think he might be sick." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. "Emma," Lily finally said, her voice suddenly very careful. "What exactly do you think you know?" Her careful tone confirmed my worst fears immediately. "Lily, please, tell me the truth. Is Daniel sick?" Another long pause. Then quietly Lily said, "I promised him I wouldn't say anything. But Emma, I think you deserve to know. He's at County General Hospital right now. He has been there most evenings this week." My blood turned to ice. "What kind of hospital? Why is he there every evening?" "I can't say more than that," Lily said, her voice thick with emotion now. "Please, Emma, go to him. He needs you, whether he believes that or not." I hung up the phone and drove immediately to County General Hospital, my mind racing through every terrible possibility imaginable. Cancer, heart disease, some rare illness I had never even heard of. By the time I arrived at the hospital parking lot, my hands were shaking so badly I could barely turn off my car. I found Daniel sitting alone on a bench just outside the hospital's main entrance, his head bowed, his shoulders slumped with obvious exhaustion. He looked up when he heard my footsteps approaching, his face registering surprise, then something like relief, then fear all at once. "Emma," he said softly, "what are you doing here?" "Lily told me you've been coming here every night," I said, sitting down beside him on the cold bench. "Daniel, please, just tell me the truth. Are you sick?" Daniel's face crumbled slightly, and for a long moment, he said nothing at all, simply staring down at his hands. Finally, he took a deep, shaky breath. "It's not me," he said quietly. "Emma, it's not me who's sick." Confusion flooded through me. Then who? Daniel looked up at me then, his eyes filled with a deep, exhausted grief that I had never seen in him before, not once during our entire 4 years together. "It's my father," he said softly. "Emma, my dad has been sick for almost 6 months now. Advanced heart failure. The doctors say he doesn't have much time left. Maybe a few more months if we're lucky." The words hit me like a physical blow, an entirely different kind of shock than the one I had been braced for. "Oh, Daniel," I whispered, my hand instinctively reaching for his. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because he asked me not to," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "He didn't want anyone outside the immediate family to know, not even you." He was embarrassed, I think, about being sick, about needing help. He made me promise to keep it quiet, to keep everything as normal as possible for as long as we could. "But Daniel, this explains so much," I said gently. "The doctor's appointments, the exhaustion, the distraction. But it still doesn't explain why you rejected my proposal in front of everyone. If your father is sick, why not just say yes and get married quickly, so he could be there to see it?" Daniel was quiet again for a long moment, staring off into the dark parking lot. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. "Because there's more to it than just his illness, Emma. There's something else, something I still haven't told you, something much harder to explain." My heart sank with a new kind of dread. "What is it, Daniel? Please, just tell me. I can't handle any more secrets." Daniel turned to look at me then, his eyes filled with a fear and sadness so deep, it nearly broke my heart all over again. "It's about the surgery," he said quietly. "The heart surgery my father needs. Emma, it's an experimental procedure, extremely expensive, not covered by regular insurance. Without it, he has maybe 3 months left. With it, maybe he has years." "How expensive?" I asked carefully. Daniel closed his eyes. $200,000, Emma. Money my family simply does not have." I sat there on the cold hospital bench, absorbing this new, devastating information. "Daniel, I still don't understand. What does the money have to do with rejecting my proposal?" Daniel took a deep, shaky breath, finally ready, it seemed, to share the full truth. "About 5 months ago, right after my father's diagnosis, I made a decision. I decided I was going to find a way to pay for his surgery, no matter what it took. I started looking into everything: loans, extra jobs, selling anything valuable I owned." "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked softly. "We could have figured this out together." "Because of what I eventually decided to do," Daniel said, his voice tight with shame. "Emma, there is a private medical trial program testing a new, less invasive version of the surgery my father needs. The trial covers the entire cost, completely free, in exchange for detailed medical monitoring and documentation." "That sounds like good news," I said, confused about why this would be something he needed to hide. "It would be," Daniel said, "except the trial has strict requirements. Patients need what they call a stable home support system to qualify, someone besides just the patient's adult children, who they consider unreliable for long-term care documentation. Specifically, they wanted proof of an established, long-term family unit surrounding the patient, ideally including a married child, someone with a legal spouse who could share caregiving responsibilities and sign necessary medical documents if I am ever unavailable due to work." Understanding began to dawn on me, slowly, painfully. "Daniel, are you saying you needed to be married to qualify your father for this trial?" Daniel nodded miserably. "The trial coordinator explained everything to me 2 weeks before Lily's wedding. She said if I could show a stable marriage, an actual legal marriage, not just a long relationship, my father's application would move to the very top of the list. Without it, he could wait 8 months or more for another opening, time he simply does not have." "So when I proposed," I said slowly, the full weight of understanding crashing over me, "you thought I somehow knew about this? You thought I was proposing because of the trial requirements?" "No," Daniel said quickly, shaking his head. "No, Emma, I know you had no idea about any of this. That's exactly the problem. When you got down on one knee in front of everyone, my mind went completely blank with panic, because saying yes to you right then would have meant marrying you for the wrong reasons, at least partly. It would have meant using our engagement, using your love, as a tool to save my father, without you ever understanding the real reasons behind the timing." Tears filled my eyes as pieces continued falling into place. "So you said no because you didn't want to trick me into a rushed marriage." "Exactly," Daniel said, his own eyes wet with tears now. "Emma, I love you. I have wanted to marry you for a long time. Truly, for real reasons that have nothing to do with medical trials or insurance requirements. But saying yes to your proposal that night, under those circumstances, would have felt like using you. Like turning the most important, sacred decision of our lives into something transactional, something desperate and dishonest. I could not do that to you. I love you too much to let our marriage begin with even a shadow of that kind of deception." I sat there in stunned silence, trying to process everything he had just shared. "But Daniel, why didn't you just explain all of this to me immediately, instead of leaving me humiliated in front of 200 people for weeks?" Daniel's shoulders slumped with obvious shame. "Because I panicked afterward too, Emma. I felt so guilty, so ashamed of the mess I had created, of hurting you so publicly, that I could not figure out how to even begin explaining something so complicated. Every day that passed without telling you made the silence feel even harder to break. I am so sorry, Emma. I know I handled everything terribly wrong." I looked at him, this man I loved, sitting there broken and exhausted beside me in a cold hospital parking lot, carrying the enormous weight of his father's illness and his own tangled fear all alone for months. "Daniel," I said softly, "why didn't you just trust me enough to explain from the beginning, not just about the proposal, but about your father's illness in general? I could have helped you carry this weight so much sooner." "I know," Daniel said quietly. "I think I was scared. Scared of burdening you with something so heavy. Scared of admitting how frightened I have been these past few months, watching my father get weaker and weaker, feeling completely helpless to save him." I reached over and took his hand gently, lacing my fingers through his. "You don't have to carry things alone, Daniel. Not the big things, and not the small things either. That's what love is supposed to mean." Daniel looked at me with such raw, grateful relief that new tears spilled down his cheeks. "I don't deserve you, Emma. Not after everything I put you through." "Maybe not," I said softly, managing a small, watery smile. "But I love you anyway. And right now, I want to help however I can. Tell me everything about this trial program. Let's figure this out together, properly this time." 2 days after learning the truth from Daniel, I visited Carmen at her own home, wanting to understand her side of everything as well. She opened the door looking tired but relieved to see me. "Emma," she said softly, pulling me into a tight hug. "Daniel told me he finally explained everything. I am so glad. I have hated keeping this from you these past few months." We sat together in her kitchen, and Carmen poured us both cups of tea, her hands trembling slightly as she spoke. "Robert made both of us promise not to tell anyone outside the immediate family," she explained. "He has always been a proud man, Emma, proud of providing for his family, proud of never needing help from anyone. Getting sick terrified him, not because of death, but because of feeling weak, feeling like a burden." "I understand pride," I said gently, "but Carmen, it nearly cost Daniel everything. It nearly cost us everything." "I know," Carmen said, tears filling her eyes. "I argued with Robert about this many times these past months. I told him secrets like this only cause more pain in the end. But he was stubborn, and Daniel, wanting to respect his father's wishes during such a frightening time, went along with the silence longer than he should have." "Why didn't you just tell me yourself, that day at the grocery store?" I asked, though gently, without real accusation in my voice. "I wanted to," Carmen admitted. "Believe me, Emma, watching you suffer through those weeks of confusion broke my heart, but it was not my secret to share. I could only hint, hope you would find your own way to the truth, which eventually you did." I reached across the table and took her hand gently. "I'm not angry with you, Carmen. I understand why you felt caught in the middle. I just wish, as a family, we could learn to trust each other with hard truths sooner, rather than protecting each other into more pain." Carmen nodded, wiping at her eyes. "That is exactly what I have been telling Robert since his surgery was confirmed. Perhaps now, having seen how much unnecessary pain the silence caused, we can all do better going forward." "I think we can," I said softly, smiling at her through my own threatening tears. "Thank you for loving your son enough to eventually help guide me toward the truth, even in your own careful way." Carmen squeezed my hand warmly. Thank you for loving him enough to fight for the truth in the first place, Emma. Not every woman would have shown that kind of patience and courage after being hurt so publicly. We sat together for another hour, talking through the details of Robert's condition, the trial program, and the wedding plans slowly forming in both our minds. By the time I left her house that afternoon, I felt not just closer to understanding what had happened, but closer to Carmen herself, bonded now by shared honesty, rather than painful, isolating secrets. I barely slept that night, my mind swirling with everything I had learned in such a short amount of time. Daniel's father, dying. A secret trial program, a marriage requirement neither of us had asked for, and beneath all of it, the quiet, painful realization that Daniel had spent months carrying this enormous weight, almost entirely alone, too afraid or too loyal to his father's wishes to share it with me sooner. The next morning, Daniel took me to see his father for the first time since learning about the diagnosis. Robert Reyes lay in a hospital bed, looking smaller and more fragile than I remembered from the last time I had seen him, at a family barbecue almost a year earlier. His skin looked pale, his breathing slightly labored, but his eyes lit up warmly when he saw me walk in beside his son. "Emma," he said, his voice weak but genuinely happy, "I have been hoping to see you. I owe you a very large apology, young lady." "You don't owe me anything, Mr. Reyes," I said gently, pulling a chair close to his bedside. "Please call me Robert," he said, managing a small smile. "And I do owe you an apology. My son has been carrying an impossible burden these past months, trying to protect both you and me at the same time. I should have insisted he tell you the truth from the very beginning. Instead, my own stubborn pride kept this secret buried far longer than it should have been." "Dad," Daniel said gently, "you don't need to explain anything. This isn't your fault." "It is partly my fault," Robert insisted, though his voice remained weak. "I did not want anyone to see me as weak, as sick, as someone needing help. That foolish pride nearly cost my son the woman he loves, humiliated in front of everyone at his own sister's wedding. I am deeply sorry, Emma, for the pain my stubbornness caused you." Tears filled my eyes at his heartfelt words. "Robert, I understand now. Daniel explained everything last night. I just wish I could have helped sooner." "You can help now," Robert said, his eyes suddenly sharp and serious despite his physical weakness. "If you are willing, that is. I understand this is an enormous thing to ask of anyone." I looked between Robert and Daniel, understanding immediately what he meant. The trial program, the marriage requirement. Robert nodded slowly. "I would never ask either of you to rush into marriage purely for my sake. That would be selfish beyond words. But Daniel tells me you two have loved each other deeply for 4 years already. That marriage was already something you both wanted, just not yet officially planned. If that is true, and if you are both willing, perhaps we could simply move forward with plans you already had in your hearts, just somewhat sooner than originally intended." I looked at Daniel, searching his face carefully. "Is that true? Do you still want to marry me? For real reasons, not just because of the trial?" Daniel took both my hands in his eyes filled with raw, open honesty. "Emma, I have wanted to marry you since the day I realized I loved you, 3 years ago. I was planning to propose myself, actually. This coming winter, I had already looked at rings. I already spoke to your father, asking his blessing months ago." Shock rippled through me. "You already asked my father?" Daniel nodded, a small, embarrassed smile finally breaking through his exhaustion. "About 4 months ago, before any of this trial business even started. He said yes immediately, by the way. Told me it was about time." I laughed through my tears, overwhelmed by this unexpected revelation. "So this whole time we were both planning to propose to each other?" "It seems that way," Daniel said softly. "I just never got the chance, because you beat me to it in front of 200 people." "And you said no," I reminded him, though my voice held more affection now than accusation. "I said no to the timing, to the confusion, to the fear of using something so meaningful for the wrong reasons," Daniel said seriously. "But I never once said no to loving you, Emma. Never to wanting a future with you." Robert watched this exchange with quiet, exhausted happiness, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. "So," he said softly, "what will it be, you two? Will you help an old, stubborn man see his son truly happy before it's too late? I looked at Daniel, my heart suddenly full instead of broken, hope replacing weeks of confusion and pain. I already asked you once, I said softly. I suppose it's only fair you get your turn now. Daniel's eyes widened with understanding. Slowly, carefully, he knelt down beside his father's hospital bed, right there in that small, sterile room, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket, one I realized he must have been carrying for months already. Emma Walsh, he said, his voice thick with emotion. I should have said this months ago, properly, without any confusion or secret standing between us. I love you. I have loved you for years, and I want to build our whole future together, honestly and completely. Will you marry me? Tears streamed freely down my face as I nodded, unable to speak for a long moment, through my overwhelming happiness. Yes, I finally managed. Yes, Daniel. 1,000 times yes. Robert Reyes, weak and pale in his hospital bed, began to cry quiet, joyful tears of his own, watching his son finally find real happiness after months of fear and hidden burden. Once Daniel and I had truly reconciled, everything moved quickly. We visited the trial coordinator together the following week, providing our marriage license application and explaining our situation honestly. To our enormous relief, the coordinator assured us that a legal marriage, however recently finalized, would satisfy the program's requirements completely. We decided against a large, elaborate wedding this time. After the disaster of the public proposal, neither of us wanted another huge, overwhelming event. Instead, we planned a small, intimate ceremony in Robert's own backyard, just 2 weeks later, surrounded only by our closest family and friends. Lily helped organize everything, still feeling guilty about her own wedding being overshadowed by our painful public moment, though I assured her repeatedly that none of what happened was her fault. I just want this day to be everything you deserve, she told me, helping me choose a simple, elegant dress for the small ceremony. No stress, no drama, just pure happiness this time. The morning of our wedding, my mother helped me get ready in my childhood bedroom, the same room where I had once dreamed about my future wedding day as a little girl, never imagining the strange, complicated path that would eventually lead me there. Are you scared? My mother asked gently, fixing a small flower into my hair. A little, I admitted. Everything happened so fast, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. That's how you know it's real, my mother said softly, kissing my forehead gently. The backyard ceremony was small, but deeply meaningful. Robert Reyes, though weak, insisted on being wheeled outside in a special chair to witness his son's wedding personally, oxygen tank quietly humming beside him. Daniel stood waiting for me beneath a simple wooden arch decorated with white flowers, his face lit up with pure, unguarded joy when he saw me walking toward him. You look beautiful, he whispered when I finally reached him, taking both my hands gently in his. So do you, I whispered back, smiling through happy tears. The ceremony itself was brief but powerful, filled with honest, heartfelt vows we had written ourselves rather than reciting traditional lines. Daniel's voice broke slightly as he spoke about learning, through recent hardship, that true love means trusting your partner enough to share your deepest fears, rather than trying to protect them through painful silence. I promise, from this day forward, he said, his eyes locked onto mine, to never let fear silence me again. To trust you completely, with every burden, every joy, every difficult truth life brings our way. Tears streamed down my face as I spoke my own vows in return, promising patience, understanding, and unwavering love, no matter what challenges life placed before us. When Daniel finally slipped the ring onto my finger, the same simple gold band I had once offered him myself weeks earlier at Lily's wedding, the small gathered crowd erupted into warm, joyful applause. You may kiss your bride, the officiant said with a warm smile. Daniel pulled me close, kissing me deeply, completely, with none of the fear or confusion that had haunted us just weeks earlier. When we finally pulled apart, both of us laughing through happy tears, I caught sight of Robert Reyes watching us from his wheelchair, tears streaming down his own weathered cheeks, joy radiating from his tired but peaceful face. "Finally," he said, his weak voice somehow carrying clearly across the quiet backyard. "Finally, my son is truly happy." Before our wedding could move forward, Daniel and I visited the medical trial office together, wanting to fully understand the requirements ourselves, rather than relying on second-hand explanations. The coordinator, a calm, professional woman named Dr. Patterson, greeted us warmly in her small, cluttered office at the university hospital. "I want to be completely transparent with you both," she said, folding her hands on her desk. "This program exists because our new surgical technique needs long-term monitoring data, and patients recovering from major heart procedures do significantly better with strong, consistent support systems at home. A legal spouse, in our experience, provides a more stable, documented caregiving arrangement than adult children alone, who often have demanding jobs and their own growing families." "So the marriage requirement isn't just paperwork," I said, understanding more fully now. "It's actually about giving Robert the best possible chance at recovery." "Exactly," Dr. Patterson said, nodding. "We have seen it repeatedly in our data. Patients with a spouse actively involved in daily care show measurably better outcomes. I know this places an unusual, perhaps uncomfortable pressure on couples, and I always tell families the same thing. Never rush a marriage purely to qualify for this program. It must be a real, lasting commitment, or it will not serve the patient well in the long run anyway." "We're not rushing anything," Daniel said, reaching for my hand. "We had already planned to marry. This simply moved our timeline forward." Dr. Patterson smiled warmly. "That is exactly what I hope to hear. I have seen couples try to fake this kind of commitment before, and it never ends well, for the patient or for them. Genuine partnership shows, Mr. Reyes. I can already see it between the two of you." We spent nearly an hour in her office, going over the surgical procedure in detail, the recovery timeline, and the daily responsibilities we would need to manage together as Robert healed. Dr. Patterson answered every question patiently, clearly experienced in guiding frightened families through this uncertain process. "One more thing," she said as we prepared to leave. "This program only works because families are honest, with us and with each other. Whatever confusion led you here, I am glad you found your way to honesty before beginning this journey. It will serve you well in the difficult months ahead." Her words stayed with me long after we left that small, cluttered office, a quiet confirmation that the honesty Daniel and I had finally found together was not just important for our own relationship, but for Robert's recovery as well. 3 weeks after our small, honest wedding, Robert's medical trial application was formally approved. The surgery was scheduled quickly, given the urgency of his declining condition, taking place just 5 days after his acceptance into the program. The night before his surgery, Daniel and I visited him at the hospital together, finding him surprisingly calm and at peace, despite the enormous risk ahead of him. "I want you both to know something," Robert said, his voice weak but steady. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I am at peace. I got to see my son marry the woman he truly loves, honestly and completely. That alone is worth more to me than any medical outcome." "Don't talk like that, Dad," Daniel said, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "You're going to be just fine. This surgery is going to work." "I hope so, son," Robert said gently. "But if it doesn't, please know that these past few weeks, watching you and Emma find your way back to each other, have been some of the happiest of my entire life." I squeezed Daniel's hand tightly, both of us fighting back tears as we sat beside Robert's hospital bed that quiet evening, praying silently for the surgery ahead to succeed. The surgery itself took nearly 8 hours. Daniel and I sat together in the hospital waiting room the entire time, along with Lily, Marcus, Carmen, and my own parents, who had all come to offer their support during those long, agonizing hours. I had never seen Daniel so frightened, his hands trembling slightly every time a doctor walked past the waiting room, his eyes desperately searching for any sign of news about his father's condition. "He's going to be okay," I told him repeatedly throughout those long hours, holding his hand tightly, offering whatever comfort and strength I could manage. "Robert is strong, he's a fighter." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the surgeon emerged from the operating room, still wearing his surgical scrubs, a tired but genuinely hopeful expression on his face. "The surgery was successful," he announced to our anxious group. "Your father's heart responded very well to the new procedure. Recovery will take time, but his prognosis has improved dramatically. We are optimistic about a full recovery." The waiting room erupted into relieved tears and joyful hugs. Daniel pulled me close immediately, his whole body shaking with overwhelming relief. "He's going to be okay," Daniel whispered against my hair, his voice thick with emotion. "Emma, my father is actually going to be okay." "I told you," I whispered back, holding him tightly, tears of relief streaming down my own face. "Everything is going to be okay now." Robert's recovery, though slow, progressed steadily and positively over the following months. By the time our first wedding anniversary arrived, he was strong enough to walk unassisted around his own backyard, tending happily to a small garden he had started as part of his physical therapy routine. While Robert recovered, another challenge remained unresolved. The blurry video of my public proposal and Daniel's painful rejection had continued circulating quietly among friends and acquaintances for weeks. People who barely knew us whispered theories about what had happened. Some assumed Daniel had cheated, others assumed I had pressured him into something he was not ready for. A few unkind comments online even suggested I had embarrassed myself by proposing in such a public, dramatic way in the first place. I tried to ignore it at first, focusing instead on Daniel, on Robert's recovery, on rebuilding our relationship after everything that had happened. But one afternoon, a former college friend messaged me directly, asking bluntly if the rumors about Daniel already having someone else were true. That message broke something in me. I showed it to Daniel that evening, my hands shaking with frustration and hurt. I scrolled further through my messages that same evening, finding several other comments I had been quietly ignoring for weeks. One old classmate had written, "I always thought something seemed off about them, as though our 4 years together had been some kind of performance." Another simply sent a laughing emoji beneath a shared clip of the video, without a single word of context. Seeing it all collected together, rather than in scattered, isolated moments, made the cruelty land harder than it had before. "People are saying such awful things," I said, "about both of us. I hate that we're just letting the wrong story spread, when the real one is so much more complicated, and honestly, so much more meaningful." Daniel read the message carefully, his expression darkening with anger and guilt. "This is my fault," he said quietly. "If I had just trusted you from the beginning, none of this would have happened. You wouldn't have to deal with cruel gossip because of my silence." "It's not entirely your fault," I said gently. "But Daniel, I think it's time we shared the truth. Not all the private medical details, but enough to explain what really happened. People deserve to understand. And honestly, so do we. I think we both need this chapter to finally close properly." Daniel nodded slowly, thinking it over. "What did you have in mind?" "Lily offered to host a small gathering," I said. "Just close friends and family, the same people who were there that night at her wedding. What if we told them together? Explained everything honestly, on our own terms, instead of letting rumors keep spreading?" Daniel considered this for a long moment, before nodding firmly. "You're right. We owe them the truth, especially after they watched something so painful and confusing happen without any real explanation." 2 weeks later, we gathered at Lily's house, the same close friends and family members who had witnessed the disastrous proposal, now sitting quietly in her living room, curious and a little nervous about what we were about to share. Daniel stood beside me, holding my hand tightly, as we explained everything honestly: his father's illness, the desperate search for treatment options, the strict trial requirements, the overwhelming panic Daniel had felt that night, terrified of using our relationship dishonestly to save his father's life. By the time we finished explaining, several people in the room were crying quietly, moved by the depth of love and sacrifice hidden behind what had originally looked like simple cruelty and rejection. "I am so sorry I judged you both so quickly," said one of Daniel's old college friends, wiping tears from his eyes. "I had no idea what you were both really going through." "None of us did," Lily said gently, squeezing my hand from her seat beside me. "That's exactly why Emma and Daniel wanted to share the truth today." By the end of that evening, the painful, confusing story that had spread through whispers and blurry videos had finally transformed into something people understood completely differently. No longer a story of humiliation and rejection, but one of genuine love, sacrifice, and eventual triumph over impossible circumstances. A few weeks after our honest conversation with friends and family, Lily suggested something unexpected. "What if we threw you both a proper celebration?" she asked one evening over dinner. "Not a wedding, since you're already married, but a real celebration, surrounded by everyone who deserves to see you both truly happy together, without any confusion or misunderstanding hanging over the moment." At first I hesitated, worried about reopening old wounds by revisiting anything connected to that painful night. But Daniel, surprisingly, seemed immediately drawn to the idea. "I think that's exactly what we need," he said thoughtfully. "A chance to replace that terrible memory with something better, something that shows everyone, and honestly reminds ourselves too, just how much we've overcome together." We decided to host a small backyard celebration at Robert's house, now fully recovered enough to enjoy hosting guests comfortably in his own garden. We invited the same close circle of friends and family who had witnessed the painful proposal months earlier, along with a few new friends we had made throughout Robert's recovery process. The celebration itself felt completely different from that tense, humiliating night at the vineyard. Instead of dramatic surprises, we simply enjoyed each other's company, sharing food, laughter, and quiet, genuine happiness among people who now truly understood our story. Midway through the evening, Daniel stood up unexpectedly, gently tapping his glass to get everyone's attention, echoing the very gesture I had made months earlier under such different circumstances. "I want to say something," he began, his voice steady and confident this time, nothing like the panicked, frightened man from Lily's wedding. "Many of you were there the night Emma bravely proposed to me, and watched me say something that broke both our hearts in front of everyone. I want you to know how deeply sorry I am for that pain, and how grateful I am that Emma loved me enough to give me a second chance to make things right." He turned to look directly at me, his eyes filled with warmth and open vulnerability. "Emma, you taught me that real love means trusting your partner completely, even with your deepest fears and burdens. I promise, from this day forward, to always choose honesty over silence, no matter how difficult the truth might be." Tears filled my eyes as our friends and family watched, many of them crying happy tears of their own, witnessing the true, complete story finally unfold before them. "I love you, Emma Reyes," Daniel said softly, using my new married name for the very first time in public. "Thank you for teaching me what real love actually means." The small crowd erupted into warm applause, raising their glasses in a joyful, heartfelt toast, celebrating not just our marriage, but the honesty, vulnerability, and deep love that had eventually grown from such a painful, confusing beginning. The months following Robert's surgery brought steady, quiet healing, both physically for him and emotionally for Daniel and me. Marriage, we quickly discovered, was not simply about grand gestures or dramatic moments, but about small, everyday choices to remain honest and present with each other. Daniel struggled at first with old habits, occasionally slipping back into quiet, private worry instead of sharing his fears openly with me. One evening, several months into our marriage, I noticed him staring blankly at his phone, his face tight with visible tension. "What's wrong?" I asked gently, sitting down beside him on our couch. "Nothing," he said quickly, setting the phone aside. "Just work stuff." I studied his face carefully, remembering painfully how similar denials had once led to months of hidden fear and eventual heartbreak. "Daniel," I said softly, "remember what we promised each other at our wedding? No more silence, even when things feel difficult to share." Daniel sighed, running a hand through his hair, clearly caught between old habits and new promises. "It's my job," he admitted finally. "There have been layoffs happening at the company. I found out today my position might be affected next month." "Why didn't you want to tell me?" I asked gently, taking his hand in mine. "I didn't want to worry you," Daniel admitted, "especially so soon after everything with my dad. I felt like I needed to protect you from more bad news." "Daniel," I said softly, squeezing his hand firmly. We're partners now, real partners. That means sharing worries together, not carrying them alone to protect each other. We're stronger together than either of us are apart. Daniel looked at me for a long moment, something shifting visibly in his expression, old patterns slowly giving way to new understanding. "You're right," he said quietly. "I'm sorry. Old habits, I guess." "It's okay," I said gently. "Just keep trying." That's really all any of us can do. Over the following weeks, we faced the uncertainty of his potential job loss together, openly discussing our finances, our options, our fears, rather than Daniel silently carrying the weight alone as he once might have done. Ultimately, his position remained secure, but the experience taught us both something valuable about practicing real honesty, even during smaller, less dramatic challenges than the ones we had already overcome together. Robert, meanwhile, continued growing stronger every month, eventually returning to many of the hobbies he had once loved before his illness, including his passion for woodworking, which he had set aside during his years of declining health. "I want to build something for you two," he told us one Sunday afternoon, several months after his surgery, as we all sat together enjoying a quiet family dinner. A proper wedding gift, since the ceremony itself happened so quickly. A few weeks later, Robert proudly presented us with a beautifully handcrafted wooden bench, carved with both our names and wedding date carefully etched into the smooth wood. "For your backyard," he said, his eyes glistening with quiet pride. "A place to sit together and remember how far you both have come." We placed the bench proudly in our own small backyard, and it quickly became our favorite spot for quiet evening conversations, a physical reminder of the honesty and strength we continued building together, one small, meaningful choice at a time. Not every conversation on that bench was easy. A few months after Robert gave us the gift, Daniel and I had our first real argument as a married couple, over something as ordinary as household chores and how we each defined fair. Voices raised slightly, old frustrations about unspoken expectations finally surfacing after weeks of quiet buildup. "I feel like I'm always the one remembering things," I said, more sharply than I intended, standing in our small kitchen with a sink full of dishes neither of us had gotten around to. Groceries, bills, scheduling Robert's follow-up appointments. It's exhausting carrying the mental list alone. Daniel looked stung, then, to his credit, took a breath instead of retreating. "You're right," he said slowly. "I've been leaning on you more than I realized, especially with everything going on with my dad. That's not fair to you." We ended up outside on the bench that evening, working through a simple, practical plan for dividing responsibilities more evenly. Nothing dramatic, just an honest conversation about needs and expectations. It was a small disagreement in the scheme of everything we had already survived together, but it mattered precisely because it was small and ordinary, proof that we could disagree, communicate, and resolve things without secrecy or silence creeping back into our marriage. "See," I said afterward, leaning my head against his shoulder as the sun set over our small backyard. "This is what it's supposed to look like. Just two people figuring it out together." "I could get used to this version of hard," Daniel said, laughing softly, kissing the top of my head. While Daniel worked through his own healing process with his father and their complicated history of silence, I found myself facing questions from my own family as well. My parents had, of course, witnessed the disastrous proposal firsthand, and though they tried to remain supportive throughout the following weeks, I could tell they harbored real concerns about the sudden, rushed nature of our eventual wedding. "Emma, sweetheart," my father said carefully, about a week before our small backyard ceremony, "I just want to make sure you are marrying Daniel, because you truly want to, and not simply out of guilt or pressure surrounding his father's illness." His words stung slightly, though I understood his concern completely. "Dad, I love Daniel. I have loved him for 4 years already. This isn't about guilt or pressure. If anything, this whole experience has shown me how deeply committed he already was to our future together, even before any of this happened with his father." My mother, sitting quietly beside my father during this conversation, reached over and squeezed my hand gently. "I believe you, sweetheart. I just worry about you rushing into something so quickly after everything that happened at Lily's wedding. That kind of public humiliation leaves deep marks, even when the explanation behind it turns out to be understandable. I know, I admitted honestly. Part of me is scared too, scared that we're moving too fast, scared that old wounds might resurface later. But Dad, Mom, I have never doubted, not once, that Daniel truly loves me. What I doubted was whether he trusted me enough to include me fully in the difficult parts of his life. That is what we are working on now, together. My parents exchanged a long, thoughtful look before my father finally nodded slowly. Then we support you completely, he said. Just promise us you will keep talking honestly with each other, especially when things feel difficult. I promise, I said, hugging them both tightly, grateful for their honest concern and their willingness to trust my own judgment about the man I loved. By the time our small wedding day arrived, my parents had grown completely comfortable with our decision, my father even giving a warm, heartfelt toast during the small reception afterward, praising both Daniel's courage in finally sharing the truth and my own patience in helping him find that courage. Marriage isn't about avoiding hard moments, my father said that evening, raising his glass toward Daniel and me. It's about facing them honestly, together. I am proud to welcome Daniel fully into our family, not despite the mistakes he made, but because of how bravely he worked to correct them. With Robert's surgery scheduled so quickly after our wedding, Daniel and I initially planned to skip any kind of honeymoon entirely, wanting to remain close to home in case complications arose during his father's recovery. But 2 months after the successful surgery, once Robert's doctors confirmed his stable, steady progress, Daniel surprised me with plane tickets to a small coastal town neither of us had ever visited before. "We deserve this," he said simply, handing me the tickets one quiet evening. A real beginning, just the two of us, away from hospitals and family emergencies and everything else that consumed our first months of marriage. We spent 5 quiet days walking along sandy beaches, eating fresh seafood at small local restaurants, and simply enjoying uninterrupted time together without the constant worry that had shadowed our relationship for so many months. One evening, sitting together on the beach, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple, Daniel took my hand gently. "I keep thinking about everything that happened," he said quietly. "How close we came to losing each other completely. All because I was too afraid to trust you with the truth." "But we didn't lose each other," I reminded him gently. "We found our way back, stronger than before." "I know," Daniel said, squeezing my hand. "I just want you to know, Emma, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to wonder again whether I trust you completely. Whatever comes our way, good or bad, we face it together, honestly, from now on. I'm holding you to that promise," I said softly, smiling as the sun continued sinking slowly into the ocean before us. "Good," Daniel said, kissing my temple gently. "I intend to keep it." We returned home from that quiet honeymoon, feeling more solid and secure in our marriage than ever before, ready to face whatever future challenges awaited us, with the honest, open communication we had both worked so hard to rebuild. About a year after our small backyard wedding, Lily called me with an unexpected invitation. "Marcus and I want to renew our vows for our first anniversary," she said, "at the same vineyard. I know that might bring up difficult memories for you both, but Emma, I would love for you and Daniel to be there. I think it might actually help, closing that chapter properly, on our own terms this time." I talked it over with Daniel that evening, both of us weighing the idea carefully. Part of me still felt a small flutter of anxiety at the thought of returning to that beautiful vineyard, the site of my greatest public humiliation. But another part of me recognized the value in facing that place again, not as broken, frightened people, but as a strong, honest couple who had survived something painful and grown from it. "I think we should go," Daniel said finally. "I think we owe it to ourselves, and honestly, to Lily and Marcus too, to reclaim that place, instead of letting it remain only a site of pain in our memory." We arrived at the vineyard on a warm September afternoon, almost exactly 1 year after everything had unfolded so painfully on that same lawn. The string lights were being hung between the same trees, the same long tables stretched across the green grass, though decorated differently this time, with autumn colors instead of summer flowers. Walking across that lawn again, hand in hand with Daniel, felt strange and powerful all at once. I could almost see the ghost of myself standing there a year earlier, on one knee, ring box trembling in my hands, utterly unaware of the painful weeks that awaited her. "Are you okay?" Daniel asked quietly, squeezing my hand as we walked toward our assigned table. "I think so," I said honestly. "It's strange being back here, but it doesn't hurt the way I thought it might." "Good," Daniel said softly, "because I have something I want to do here today." Confused, I watched as Daniel led me toward the exact same spot on the lawn where I had once knelt before him, tears in my eyes, hope in my heart, only to be met with devastating rejection. He turned to face me, his own eyes suddenly serious and warm. "Emma," he said, his voice carrying just enough for those nearby to hear, though nowhere near the size of the crowd that had once witnessed our painful moment. "A year ago, right here, you knelt down and asked me to marry you, showing more courage than I had ever seen from anyone. I responded with fear instead of gratitude, and I hurt you in a way I will spend the rest of my life trying to make up for." "Daniel," I whispered, tears already gathering in my eyes. "Let me finish," he said gently, smiling through his own emotion. "I want this exact spot, this place that once held so much pain for both of us, to hold something different now, something better." He knelt down then, right there on the same grass, pulling a small box from his jacket pocket, different from the ring I already wore on my finger. "This isn't a new proposal," he said softly, opening the box to reveal a delicate bracelet inside, engraved with a simple date, the date of our actual wedding. "It's a promise, a reminder that this place, this memory, no longer belongs only to our worst moment. It belongs to our whole story now, the pain and the healing both." Tears streamed freely down my face as he fastened the bracelet gently around my wrist. "I love you, Emma, completely and honestly, exactly the way you always deserved." "I love you too," I whispered, pulling him close for a deep, grateful kiss, right there on the same lawn that had once witnessed our most painful moment, now transformed into something healed and whole. Nearby, I noticed several guests who had also attended Lily's original wedding, watching us with quiet, understanding smiles, some wiping away their own happy tears at witnessing this quiet, meaningful closure. Lily found us moments later, wrapping us both in a tight hug. "I am so glad you came back," she said, smiling widely. "This feels like exactly the ending our story deserved." The vow renewal at the vineyard marked something of a turning point for Daniel and me, a symbolic close to the painful chapter that had once threatened to destroy our relationship completely. In the months that followed, our marriage continued deepening in small, meaningful ways. Daniel began seeing a therapist regularly, something he had resisted for years, worried it might make him seem weak. But after everything we had experienced together, he decided he wanted additional support in learning healthier ways to process fear and stress, rather than retreating into silence as he once had. "I don't want to accidentally repeat old patterns," he told me one evening, after returning from an early session. "Even small ones. I want to keep getting better at trusting you completely, and honestly, at trusting myself too." I admired his willingness to keep growing, even after we had already overcome so much together. It reminded me constantly why I had fallen in love with him in the first place, his quiet determination, his genuine desire to become better, not just for himself, but for the people he loved. Robert, meanwhile, continued thriving in his recovery, eventually well enough to travel again for the first time in years. He took a long-awaited trip to visit extended family overseas, sending back cheerful postcards and photographs that made Daniel laugh with relief and happiness every time a new one arrived. "He looks so happy," Daniel said one afternoon, studying a photograph of his father standing proudly in front of some ancient ruins, sunglasses perched on his nose, grinning widely at the camera. "He's earned that happiness," I said softly, squeezing Daniel's hand. "You both have." Around our second wedding anniversary, we discovered I was pregnant with Sophia, news that filled our small household with overwhelming joy. Daniel cried happy tears when I showed him the positive pregnancy test, immediately calling his father to share the wonderful news. "Dad," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "you're going to be a grandfather." I could hear Robert's joyful laughter even through the phone speaker, followed by a stream of excited questions about names, due dates, and nursery colors, questions Daniel patiently answered, laughing along with his father's obvious delight. Sophia arrived 9 months later, healthy and strong, with Daniel's same dark hair and my own stubborn determination already evident even in her earliest days. Robert held his granddaughter for the first time in the hospital room, tears streaming freely down his weathered cheeks. "I almost didn't get to see this," he whispered, gazing down at Sophia's tiny face. "I am so grateful, more grateful than words can properly express, for this second chance at life, and for getting to witness moments like this one." Watching Robert hold his granddaughter that day, surrounded by the family that honesty and courage had ultimately kept together, I felt a profound, overwhelming sense of gratitude for everything we had survived, and everything we had built together because of it. 5 years after that painful night at Lily's wedding, our lives looked completely different from anything I could have imagined during those dark, confusing weeks following Daniel's public rejection. Robert remained healthy and strong, his heart condition now fully stable thanks to the successful experimental surgery years earlier. He had become something of a local celebrity within the medical trial community, often speaking to other families facing similar frightening diagnoses, offering hope and guidance drawn from his own difficult journey. Daniel had grown significantly more comfortable sharing his fears and struggles openly with me over the years, our marriage strengthening steadily through countless small moments of honesty rather than dramatic, isolated gestures. He had even been promoted at work, taking on a leadership role that required him to practice the same open, honest communication he had worked so hard to develop within our own relationship. I continued teaching at the same elementary school, though I had also taken on a part-time role helping organize local fundraising events for families facing medical emergencies, similar to what Robert had experienced, using our own difficult journey to help other families find hope and resources during their own frightening health crises. We had also welcomed a daughter into our family, little Sophia, now 2 years old, her bright, curious eyes and stubborn determination reminding me constantly of both her father and grandfather. Lily and Marcus, whose own wedding had been so unexpectedly overshadowed by our painful public moment, had gone on to have 2 children of their own, and Lily often joked that her wedding video was famous within the family for entirely the wrong reasons. "At least people remember it," she liked to say, laughing. "Even if it's not exactly for the toast I gave." Carmen had grown especially close to me over the years, our early bond formed over shared tea and honest conversation deepening into a real friendship. She often helped watch Sophia when Daniel and I needed a quiet evening together, delighting in every small milestone her granddaughter reached. Even Dr. Patterson, the trial coordinator who had guided us so patiently through Robert's surgery process, occasionally reached out for updates, using our family's story, with our permission, as an example for other frightened families facing similar difficult decisions. On a warm Saturday afternoon, exactly 5 years after the painful night of my original proposal, our small family gathered in Robert's backyard, sitting together on the wooden bench he had carved for us years earlier, watching Sophia toddle happily across the grass, chasing after her grandfather's small, gentle dog. "Can you believe it's already been 5 years?" Daniel asked, wrapping his arm around my shoulders as we watched our daughter play. "Sometimes it feels like a lifetime ago," I said thoughtfully. "Other times, it feels like just yesterday." "I still can't believe how close we came to losing everything," Daniel admitted quietly, echoing thoughts he had shared with me many times over the years. "If you hadn't come looking for answers, if I hadn't finally found the courage to share the truth, I don't know where we would be today." "But we did find our way back to each other," I reminded him gently. "That's what matters most." Robert, sitting nearby in his own comfortable garden chair, watching his granddaughter play happily nearby, smiled warmly at us both. "You too taught me something important these past few years," he said softly. "That real strength isn't hiding our struggles to protect the people we love. It's trusting them enough to share the truth, even when it feels frightening or difficult." "We learned that together," Daniel said, smiling warmly at his father. "All 3 of us, really. Watching my small family together in that peaceful garden, 5 years removed from the most humiliating, confusing night of my entire life, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude wash over me. What had once felt like the worst moment imaginable, a public rejection witnessed by 200 people, had eventually transformed into the foundation of a deeper, more honest love than I ever could have imagined. Sometimes, I have learned, our most painful moments carry hidden gifts within them, lessons and strength we could never have discovered any other way. Daniel's secret, once revealed, had not destroyed our love as I once feared. Instead, it had taught us both the true meaning of trust, honesty, and unconditional support, lessons that continue strengthening our marriage with every passing year. He rejected my proposal in front of everyone that painful night. But his secret, once finally revealed, left me speechless in an entirely different way than I ever could have imagined, teaching me that real love sometimes requires walking through our deepest fears together, rather than avoiding them alone. Thank you for reading He Rejected My Proposal in Front of Everyone, but His Secret Left Me Speechless. This story is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to real people, hospitals, or medical trial programs is purely coincidental. I hope Emma and Daniel's story reminded you that even the most painful, public moments can hide a truth worth waiting for, and that real love grows strongest when two people finally choose honesty over silence.